And I'm really excited to introduce our guest of today's podcast, Michael Green from Baltimore, Maryland. What's up, Michael?
Hey, what's up, man? How are you? And thanks for inviting me on the show.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited. I love your laid back personality. You act like you don't flip 1,100 houses in the last 10 years, but you do, man. So just super.
I do, and it's gotten easier, and I've got more laid back about it because I think that's the secret to success today. And the better part is I followed the dress code. You said wear a black shirt because the show has a dress code. I
That's
did
right.
it. I went out and got this from Nordstrom Rack. It
That's
did cost more than I would expect it, but anyway, I'm on the
right.
code now.
We're matching, man. We're brothers,
Exactly.
flipping brothers. That's awesome.
Outlaws of house flipping.
That's right. Well, I'm just really excited just to get to know you. I know we got a chance to chat before the actual interview, and you talked about your journey with this house flipping business. You've been in it about the same amount of time I have. I've been in it, I think, a little bit longer. Got in around 2007. You've been in about 10 years. Flipped 1,100 houses in that time. You've scaled up. I think life has changed in the past few years. But I want you to start back from the beginning. What were you doing before house flipping, and bring us up to today?
Man, it's so sad to even talk about what I was doing before house flipping because honestly, it was not my life's purpose. I was installing hardwood flooring, just making a living, zero goodness happening there, just paying the bills and getting by, trying to make a check every week just so I could eventually, fulfill that entrepreneurial dream that I'd always had my whole life. As a teenager, it got me in trouble. I grew up in a really bad neighborhood and got into some crap, ended up getting in trouble with the law. And, I always had something going. It's got me kicked out of school multiple times trying to sell firecrackers and switchblades and
And
stupid,
you sound like
crazy
a guy
stuff.
I really want to hang out with.
Dude, I'm telling you, I've always wanted to be in business for myself. At some point, I decided I didn't really know any legal ways of doing it, and I didn't want to keep living that negative life. So I really went down the positive route of getting a 9 to 5 and making a living. I did that from like 21 to like almost 31, 10 years. Sad 10 years of my life. However, eventually I got the opportunity to get into house flipping. I was doing some flooring for a guy who was a house flipper. And of course, I started asking questions because I've always dreamed about it. I've seen the commercials. It's always been in the back of my head. And I love Flip This House. I've watched every episode back when I had cable. I don't watch it much anymore because I cut my cable out. But I asked him how he did it. And he's like, hey, this dude taught me how to do this. Now, this is 10 years ago. There wasn't podcast. There wasn't, everybody in the world being so transparent and being so awesome in the community with sharing so much great information. Back then, everybody was close to the vest. So there was this one guy who was teaching in Baltimore. He wasn't the greatest guy, but he was pretty sharp. I ended up paying him 15 grand to teach me, which is crazy because I was absolutely broke at the time. And he showed me how to max out credit cards and got me on a payment plan. And, everyone said I was a complete sucker. I even felt like a complete sucker because I'm like, what did I get into? But he knew what he was doing. He knew how to find deals. The guy was a good negotiator, good at marketing. He'd been doing it 30 years and he was sharp. And so just 6 weeks of hanging out with him, I found my first deal, wholesaled it, made 16 grand. And I was able to pay that 15 grand off and kind of get out of debt that I'd dug myself into and then keep 1,000 for myself. But the best part of the story is in that year, from that time, I did 12 more deals, a couple of those being flips and the rest being wholesales, and maintained my full-time job at the same time, which was awesome because I paid my bills and did everything with the main job. But then I was able to save the money I made from my flips, and I'm having about 80K in the bank, which for a kid that grew up in the projects and still remember I still remember what like government cheese tastes like. It's actually probably my favorite cheese. Some of the best cheese you'll ever get, surprisingly. It's people, if you've ever eaten it before, it's really good. It's almost like Crackle Barrel cheddar or something. I don't know.
Aged, yep.
Yeah, it's pretty good stuff. And you get a big block of it. Like a kid who's grew up that way to have 80K in the bank, I did absolutely feel rich. And I know for some people, like 80K is nothing. For others, it's a lot. But for me, it was just life changing. And it was enough for me to take the jump and quit my job, which was very scary at the time. But I went in full time, got in with a partner who had more funds than me because 80K doesn't go all that far when you're trying to take the world over. And me and him ended up building an amazing business. At one point, a couple of years ago, I was doing about 150 houses a year.
Wow. Wow. That's an amazing story. And I love kind of the rags to riches story, growing up in the projects. And I lived more of a middle class, but I remember my dad, he was a teacher for 33 years. And I remember I started getting into real estate, and he made a quote that affected me so much because I was going to be a teacher too. I have a teaching background. And he said, I don't remember a time where I ever had more than 5K in the bank. That's what he said.
Yeah.
At 33 years, and I was like,
Yeah.
wow. That's crazy. So I can definitely relate to that. And 80K is a lot in the bank compared to a lot of people. When you're talking to
Mm,
own your own podcast and you're talking to
mm.
entrepreneurs from all over the nation, they make it sound, not that cool, but that is really, really awesome, man. So that first year, you found that deal, made 16K on the very first deal, which is awesome. You
Mhm.
did 12 more deals, and then you quit your job. And I always love talking to people because people think that you just jump right in. They haven't done a deal yet. They quit their job and just go full bore. You obviously did this part time, but when did the light bulb go off for you? We're like, man, I think I should quit my job. I think I should go full time. Was it, what?
So I always like to, I mean, honestly, I don't take credit for much of the greatness that happens. We surround ourselves with amazing people and they push us into the right stuff. And the partner at the time who was courting me to be his partner, because I had done some deals and I was maybe like one chapter ahead of him. And he just like, I want to partner with someone who is like ready to like work hard. He was more of the investor type and had money. And we ended up being great partners and building that business together. But he kind of pushed me. He's like, dude, let's be all in on this. Cause I might have kept doing that for another year because it was fearful for me to get rid of that consistent income. But the key to, I think, right now is if you can't make good income on the side, then doing this full time won't work either. So you either can figure it out in 2 hours a day, or it's not going to be any different if you had 8 hours a day. And we often think if we quit our job, it would be easier because we'd have the time. But some of the best systems are built when you only have 2 hours a day to execute them.
Yep,
Right. And the
true.
worst ones are built when you have 8 to 10 hours a day because we just do everything inefficiently.
Yeah. I always compare it to when I'm getting ready to go on a 10-day vacation. Like that week before the vacation, I am the most productive ever
Yeah.
because I'm going to be gone. Right. And I'm like, why can't I just, do that all the time and build these systems around it? Like, for example, 2 months ago, I went to Guatemala. We went on a mission trip and I told my team, I said, hey, I'm not going to do anything. I want to be present. I want to be there. And so I set these systems in place. And when I got back, I said, hey, whatever you guys are doing, just keep doing it. And
Mhm.
so you almost have to force yourself to do that. Like you said, maybe just give yourself a couple hours a day. So that's awesome.
I mean, that's such a great story and so relevant that when, most people, we haven't even gotten to this yet, but eventually me and my partner ended up kind of going on our own because we learned so much from each other. And, we wanted to kind of run a smaller version of what we were running because 150 houses a year required a lot of marketing, a lot of people. And it was a zoo to try to keep everything together, a lot of moving parts and, a lot of
Especially if
hours and
you're flipping
stressful.
them, actually, like wholesale businesses,
Yeah.
that is still a lot and it's crazy. But
Yeah.
actually fixing them up too, that would be
Yeah, we were fixing over 100 of them.
wow.
So yeah, we're fixing a ton, and it was just a lot, right? I mean, we loved the chaotic, ness of it. It was fun. We like problem solving, but at the end of the day, he was 20 years older than me, and he's like, Mike, we're not going to do this forever. And we eventually realized that, like, he had money when I met him, and I needed that. And he had this charismatic personality; he could talk anyone into anything. I learned a lot of that. And then I had these like really great base and systems, and he learned that from me. And we just had kind of rubbed off on each other essentially and really didn't need each other. And it was the right move. And I don't know if I would have made it because I'm so loyal and don't like to change things. And when it's working, I'm like, don't mess with it. But I'm glad he actually had the heart to do it because at the end of the day, it gave me the freedom to go out and start a whole new business 3.5 years ago. And now I flip a lot less houses. I make more money and I work 15, 20 hours a week. And back to what you said about going to Guatemala, part of how I was able to create a business that runs really effectively in 15 to 20 hours a week is that first year on my own, I traveled 20 times and I forced my business to work within the hours of wanting to live my life first and my business being the thing that funded the life I wanted to live. And that was a big shift I made because my life was my business before that. And my coach, first thing he said to me is like, Mike, you got it all backwards. Like
Yep.
figure out the life you want to live. And then in your business job is to fund that life you want to live and
Yeah.
go to Guatemala, be able to help and give back and do big things. And so I forced myself to figure out how to do it in less hours. And funny enough, anything we put our focus to, it
Yeah.
happens usually.
Yeah. Well, I think that you just have to plan, and you talked about what you wanted your life to be like, what your lifestyle, traveling sounds like it's really important to you, and building your business around your life. I've talked to so many people that get burnt out, and I have been there, right? And I
Mm,
sometimes wake up like that, where I feel a little bit overwhelmed, feel a little bit burnt out, and I go back to, well, how can I plan my life to build my business around it? Or your business is going to run you, right?
yeah, good point.
So that's awesome. So I want to bring us up to today. So the last few years has been a little bit different. Your partner and you have gone out on your own. you're flipping. You said you're flipping less houses and making more money, which I think is really, really important because it doesn't sound like that even could be possible. So talked about that. How are you doing that?
There's so many misconceptions and misbeliefs around like scaling is better, and the more you do, the more you make. And the reality is that what happens is you do more, so you do make actually more, but you actually make less per house. So often, people think, well, oh, you get great deals because you're doing 100 a year. And what I found is I actually was paying more for stuff when I was doing more, because it was like this law of diminishing returns. What I'm finding now is like almost a perfect balance is a house flipping business that does 10 to 20 houses a year, but nails every single house and makes 40K, 35 to 45K on it. Because if you're running a business and you do just 10 flips a year and you make $400,000 and you're bootstrapping everything, you're in control of your construction, everything's going as planned, and you're finding great deals and you're doing all that, you can do that in 15, 20 hours a week. And I have students that are doing that right now, and I'm jealous of it because I'm still kind of connected to the old 150K. I've been scaling down. I went from 150 to 70. Last year I did 50, and now this year I'm actually like working on doing 35. But the funny part is every year my incomes went up because I'm learning to do more with what I have versus thinking that volume's the answer. So for so long, and probably ego driven or just watching too many YouTube videos, I've always thought like I want to grow something. And a lot of people outside always encouraged, like they were always very impressed with the fact that I did a lot of houses. And honestly, these days I'm more impressed with doing 35 houses a year and making the same income as someone who does 150.
Yeah, I mean, I would be too, because at the end of the day, it's a lot about the bottom line. And we talked about that before the show, that we get so fascinated with the top line. How many deals are you doing? How much gross profit are you making? And at all these masterminds and even in private conversations, does anybody really ever talk about what their net profit is?
If they're talking to me, yes, because I demand it. I don't really care. I mean, I know I've met people doing 300 houses a year who are making $350,000 net, and that's a crazy business model. I mean, talk about tight. If we have any kind of movement in the economy, that model doesn't survive. And versus where I've been in almost the same scenario, and I've been like, cleared 700K and did 40 houses, and worked 15 hours a week. And so, yeah, bottom line is like I think it's all we should be talking about, honestly. And then if we're talking about top line, it's all about bringing it down and bringing the bottom line up. And every day I'm working on bringing the top line down, bottom line up, and making more money, more profit, right? And that's yeah, man, because I don't want to run a business like that. I did for many years, and it was very stressful, and even to the point where my partner's like, we got to break this thing up because I'm nervous. And
Yeah.
he was right. He actually had way more smarts than me to see that. He had a lot more business strategy than smarts than I did.
I mean, you're always worried too, as you're scaling your business. You have more people working for you. Then you're worried about them making money, and you have to keep it going. So you're taking more risks. You're doing those thinner margins, so people have something to do. Your crews, right? So
Yeah.
kind of just this balancing act. And you seem like you have really perfected. Talked about for the show your construction. You have a construction background, and you're able to fix up a house, and you've built systems around it to be more profitable and to get the job done faster. And I've flipped a lot of houses in my days where we've fixed them up, put them on the retail market. But one thing is I always spent more money than I thought, and it always took me longer than I thought, right? And that's the typical flipper. That's not the HETV guy. So talk about what are some of your strategies that you're doing? What's different about you and your construction crews and your construction business versus the normal guy out there?
I mean, so 2 years ago where this really started for me, and obviously a lot of the stuff's coaches and other people I have around me kind of really looking at things very objectively, right? They're not even from the flipping world. So they look at things just from a business standpoint. And I made the shift from believing that you make all your money when you buy a house. Like I totally used to believe that. And I would put all of my energy, like 90% of my energy would go into acquisitions and being amazing at negotiations, marketing, and how to find deals. And then where I was being sabotaged was on the back end when I was selling it, going over budget, over timeline. And I mean, there was times when we spent 25, 30 grand a month on marketing to find deals and $0 on finding contractors. And we just weren't really appreciating how big it is, the construction piece. So once I took and had a little bit of shift in thoughts around that, I started realizing I need to put like scheduled time to become better at the construction piece of it. And you're right. The two things we have to solve is how do we get done on time? How do we get done on budget? So some of the steps for me to do that, the first I would kind of quickly go into deals. I'd done, 800, 900 at the time. So, we think we know everything. When you've done 50, you're cocky and you think you know everything. But the reality is I had to get humble. That was first step, and get really like, hey, I might have done a lot of houses. I got a lot of room to grow still. And honestly, this journey, there's never, we never get to that place where we've arrived or we're amazing. And when I changed my approach and mindset on that, everything got better because I started asking questions. And it was really interesting for a guy who'd done so many flips and been in the game so long to stop telling people stuff and start asking questions. And one of the questions I asked myself was, how do I can control this variable of like nothing happening the way it's supposed to happen? And so I started getting really big into planning pre-flip, really planning out like what is the most optimal layout that's going to get me the most money and get people super emotional about buying my property. What is a great design that's going to be cheap but look like I overspent, but I didn't overspend. That's kind of cool because I get a lot of value. And then like what is going to be like the optimal timeline of people doing things, and then how can I stack people together? So a lot of times we always had the belief like the plumber comes in, and when he's done, then the electrician comes in, and then the HVAC guy, or vice versa. Could we get these people working together? So one of the first things we did when we had this thought process is me and my project manager created a challenge. We picked a flip that was 45K in renovation, and we planned for 2 weeks on how to do it in 7 days. And we filmed the whole thing. It was awesome. And we thought it would happen like maybe in 10 or 14. Really big win. Who cares? Because 45K is generally a 5 to 6 weeks renovation. That's considered reasonably quick. People can make a lot of money doing it that fast, but we actually got it done in 7 days. And we realized that the only thing stopping us from getting done on time was our ability to have manpower in the house and have contractors stacked on top of each other without killing each other. Because the first thing we always thought is, well, we put too many people in, they're going to go crazy. We actually seen the opposite effect when we strategically got buy-in from everyone and say, look, we're going to try to accomplish this really amazing thing. We started seeing the people who used to fight handing screwdrivers to each other and helping and supporting, and it became a real team. So for so long, we believed that each contractor was their own unit and they don't play well together. And we had that limiting belief that we, allowed to control our life. And when we decided to get past it, we realized like this actually brought most of our people together. And now we had 21 people in that house for 7 days to finish it that fast. And usually we got 4 to 5, but that's why it takes 5 or 6 weeks. And so that was one of the ways we solved that problem, by the way. And then the second problem is staying on budget. And I think a lot of staying on budget, it comes down to you being the manager, you being the GC, because it's an unpopular belief, but I've studied a lot of the best house flippers in the country, and guys, not the gurus, not the people teaching stuff, but the people just running quietly very successful flipping businesses. And what I've noticed is they are really good at construction. They understand it. They realize that the other half of their business is construction business, and having a GC run everything, control it, is not a great way to scale, because you are pretty much have all your eggs in that one basket. And you got to hope he doesn't have a bad day, and you got to hope that he's going to constantly fight to keep costs down when it isn't in his best interest, because he's running a business also. And unfortunately, the businesses have two different goals. One's for him to make less money, that's your goal, and his is for him to make more money, which is not your goal, right? You want him to make a living, but you don't want him getting rich off you. So I realized I had to become my own GC. And now I do have what I would call GCs, but they're more assistant GCs. So I handle and manage everything. I have a full belief that I have to be in control of my construction process, meaning that once I started doing that, change orders disappeared. That was one of the biggest plagues we had, is that, a contractor would come in, say 55K, knowing in the back of their head it's going to turn into 65K. I'll just say 55 to outbid. And there's always something, right? There's always something you can find behind a wall. When we started controlling everything and took that piece out and took control over, change orders disappeared. And yeah, now we would put a 55K budget. We'd have a 10% contingency for things that were behind the wall and didn't know about. But when we had to do those things, we knew we could just get them done as cheaply as possible. And we could kind of hack the code of, getting people in and out. And we did everything by line item now. So it gave us ultimate control, because what's really confusing for us was when we would just say, here's the whole job for 55K. And they'd say, all right, I'm done 20K, give me 20. It's kind of hard to know when they're in between 9, 10 different jobs. So we took and broke everything down in line items and legitimately just said, you did this line item, here's the money. money. Do this line item, here's the money. And that's how we do business now. And at any point, the line items start being way higher than what we have, then we have to stop and then figure out what's going on. Is that us? Is something we made a mistake on? Is the contractor getting crazy? So as things start to get out of hand, we know quickly and we can adjust. Often we can even adjust to the point where if we spend a little here, we can find it somewhere else and then get back the budget by the time we're done. So again, it's not the easy solution, right? It's not that turnkey solution that everybody wants. But if you really, truly are like committed to having a great flip business, I realize like there's not a shortcut to that. You have to dive into the trenches and get serious about being good. And you can do it in 6 months or a year, but you will need to make that commitment is what I found. And I had to have that conversation with myself, by the way, because I was so used to sitting, in like the Wizard of Oz doing 150 houses a year and not being in the trenches.
Yeah.
So last couple of years, I got back in the trenches.
Yeah. You had the dream of you walk into it when you buy it, and then you walk into it when it's all done.
And I'd done that, right? And I would say that now I don't go as much as most people, but I'm FaceTiming. I'm being more proactively involved in the design and the decision making, and not just me, but my team. We're having team meetings around like, how can we pull more profit out of this flip, every single flip? And at the end of every single flip, we're doing what we call post-game analysis, and we're diving into what we did well, what we didn't do well, and we're making improvements. And it's surprising that even today, still making many improvements.
No, I love that. I mean, this is just awesome. I mean, this is, I haven't heard a lot of the things and it's very simple concepts, but number one, you talked about kind of pre-planning to flip. And a lot of people don't, they start jotting down things as they walk through the house, and that's about it. They spend, an hour, 2 hours just kind of planning it out. And then you put a challenge out there. And I can just imagine, you tell me if I'm wrong, but the contractors probably liked that challenge. Like, hey man, let's do it. Let's build a team and, rah, rah. Yeah. So you kind of put a purpose behind it. It's almost like a sporting event. I grew up as a basketball player here in Indiana. So we would obviously practice, we would plan for the game, and we'd practice a lot more than just the game, right? So you practice, then you play the game. But then after the game, you watch the game. And that's kind of like your post-game analysis. You're figuring out what went well, what went wrong. So I don't know. This is awesome stuff, man. You've created a machine, honestly. And you being the GC, if you can get the contractors on board, working well together, you're going to have to, if you're in the flipping business at all, you're going to have to manage something. It's either going to be the GC or just, collective contracting. So.
Yeah, you can either manage them getting done on time and in budget, or you can manage like all the other problems that come from you delegating that out. Or the word I've learned recently, I'm not that highly educated, but one of my coaches told me, he's like, Mike, you're abdicating. And I didn't know what that meant. I had to look it up, but it's basically just giving away something without any involvement. And that's that whole turnkey dream, right? Everybody wants the turnkey get rich. And there's a lot of programs that support that belief system, but I've just not met anyone who's really crushing it at any level of wholesaling, rehabbing, rentals, who just isn't decided to become like, I'm going to be like serious about this, and I'm really going to take this to that next level. And I love the analogy you use when you talk about like a professional sports team. Well, of course, they take everything to the highest level. They have to. And we're so fortunate as house flippers that even at the lowest level of flipping, you can do really well. But the things that we get when we go from, say, what I call like a level 4 or 5 house flipper versus a level 9 or 10 is like one will make like a couple $100K, the other will make probably double. But the thing you start gaining when you go from 4 or 5 to like 8, 9, and 10 is you start gaining freedom and consistency and repeatability and the lack of drama that like I think you said this earlier, that starts to stress you out, starts to burn you out. It's the drama. Now, since I'm very aware that like things won't go perfectly in my scheduling and everything I do, I realize part of the equation is there's going to be some variables. So I'm baking in the stuff that generally goes wrong. And when it goes wrong, it went from me being like, oh God, how do we fix it? What do we do? They're like, okay, cool. That was in the equation, just like we thought. Sometimes we're lucky and we're like, it was in the equation. It didn't happen. That's a good day. But if it happens, we're all fine. Like, you go out and you drive 5 o'clock in the afternoon in big city, it's going to be rush hour. So don't complain about the traffic, and house flipping's the same way, right? There's going to be some traffic jams.
That's right. And if you go out at 5 o'clock and there's not a traffic jam, hey, it's a good day.
You wonder if the zombie apocalypse is happening here in the deep Baltimore area. Or like a couple weeks ago, I went out on like a Tuesday through all the where it's normally traffic, and there was none. And I was like, what is going on? I was like, is there like a plague that's hit or something? And it was just a really heavy vacation week, and a lot of people just weren't here.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, it sounds like you have some amazing systems, and I can definitely tell just with your construction background, you've got this thing nailed. So if you're listening out there, if you're into flipping houses and you want to learn about the systems of construction, please check out the show notes on our website at simplewholesaling.com/episode 187. And this is with Michael Green, and we're going to give all his information at the end of the show too. It's going to be in the show notes as well. So Michael, before we go into the next section of the show, what is one of your biggest failures? Let's talk about that. What's one thing you've learned along this?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's so many of them. And I think one of my biggest failures for years was trying to be a perfectionist. And I know people want more, like I had this one deal and lost $70 million. Well, I've had a bunch of them where I've lost more money than I even care to talk about. But the biggest one was like trying to be perfect. And it was the failure that no one knew. It was the one where every day I focused on trying to build systems that had no failure involved, right? Because I'm naturally want things to be under control and be a perfectionist. And it wasn't until I let loose of that and realized that, okay, if I can get something to be good, but know that failing will be part of this problem, that things start to get great. And I start to get more happy and laid back and chill, because people would not explain me as being that person 3 to 4 years ago, because I was striving for perfection, right? We get caught up in that trap. And I hope that's not so vague, but it really was a huge thing for me. And my biggest failure for sure. As soon as I let loose of it,
What's a couple of things that you would say in your life that you were a perfectionist at? Was there something like a couple details?
On everything. So if somebody said they were going to be there at 3 and you come at 3:15, I'm mad about that, right? I'm angry. And honestly, today I'm probably still a little mad about it, because I like to show up on time myself. It's one of my standards. And, keeping your word when people don't keep their word with me. I do live my life. If I make a promise to someone, I'm very careful of the promises I make, but I make sure that I deliver on them. So, it is sometimes you won't hear me promising too much, but if I promise you, I will do whatever it takes to make it happen. Even if somehow it wasn't in my best interest, I might not do it again in the future, but I would make sure I'm doing that. So some of my biggest failures, and I would say is just one of the things I see a lot, is I thought that like if I put 6 weeks on a renovation and it took 7.5 weeks, that was a failure. And it really just isn't, honestly. And honestly, I should have 2 weeks baked in for crap, right?
Yeah.
Life and weather and snow, sometimes permits, whatever might come up. Like the fact that I would steal the celebration of our house, our 60K renovation taking 8 weeks instead of 6 weeks, I feel like that was my huge mistake, is stealing that complete ability to celebrate that win with my team. Because I was so freaking much a perfectionist that I wouldn't take the time to say great job. I would go right into like, why did that take 8 weeks? Let's fix it. And it was making me unhappy. And I definitely would say it was not like, it wasn't high level leadership. It was my journey to become a better leader. I had to let loose of that.
I think we can all do that. Back to the sporting events, like the coach, you win a game, but you keep focused on all the turnovers or whatever, that the team had. I definitely can be like that too. There's a couple months ago, we had one of our best months ever, but we lost money on, a few deals. And I was like, man, if we wouldn't have lost money on these deals, we would have had not only the best month, but the best month. Right. But anyways,
there's something to that. And I'll tell you, my best year I've ever had in this business, most profitable year I ever had, I had the highest amount of losses. So sometimes, and a coach told me this, he's like, if you're winning 100% of the time, you're not taking enough risk and you're not being aggressive enough. I don't recommend if you're new that you take as much risk, because you don't have that luxury. But if you're doing a little bit of volume, you have the luxury of being a little more aggressive and trying and doing things that others might not try. And there may be a spot you made money that other people, just because they're not doing 10 or 15, 20 houses a year, they don't have the capability of doing that. When we were doing 150, that was happening a lot. We lost money on 10 houses out of like 104. And had our highest income ever because of the opportunity. That's how we got to 104. Was we were seeing
there's probably some of those deals that you wouldn't have done, but you didn't end up making a lot of money on.
Yes, there were some of those. And honestly, the ones we lost money on, it wasn't because we made bad deals as much as that we realized there isn't, like we had a time we were doing 35 flips at once, and we were very, very consistent and efficient at around 25 flips at once. Now for my new business, it's smaller, but if I do over 9 flips at once, I realize I have this area where I start to be ineffective. Where yes, I can make, I get to do more flips, but my overall profit goes down because I'm getting past my area that I'll say where I run the best, essentially, right? Where I'm just humming and doing things really well. It took me a long time to understand that. I really just started understanding that a year ago. And now I focus on deal flow. If I get, that's why I wholesale. The only reason I don't rehab everything is that there'll be times where I'm already have 9 flips and 2 just come out of nowhere, and I got to sell them off. And I do get the opportunity to maybe say, oh, that one's closer to home, so I'll keep that and sell the one that's 45 minutes away to somebody who's doing something around that would be close to home for them. So I'm able to kind of interchange things as they're better for me, because I don't really look at things like profit. A lot of times say the best deals are the ones with the highest profits. Most of my deals are consistent profits, but I will say I have a much better consistency and better return rate when things are close to home and they're, say, in the county instead of the city. So it's noticing all those things, like where am I winning more often? So if I get a city deal and there's a guy that loves city deals, and I get one in county that comes up after the fact, instead of taking 10 deals, I'll sell one off and just get back to the 9 where I'm highly profitable and efficient.
Yeah, definitely, man. Good stuff. Again, if you guys are tuning in, we're talking to Michael Green out of Baltimore, Maryland, and he's talking about the systems of flipping houses, and he has perfected it. So check him out and check out our show notes at simplewholesaling.com/episode 187. And Michael, it's about that time, man. We're going to go into the section of the show that we like to call Going Deep. And in this section, I really want to dive into the change that you've had the past few years. Sounds like you had a partner for the first 6.5, 7 years. The last few years, you've went on your own, and things have changed. So what's that been like? What's the journey been like to going from kind of having that person you can bounce all these ideas off of to, kind of doing your own business, smaller business, more profitable? But I want to kind of hear from your heart what that journey's been like.
At first, very scary, obviously, right? That's awesome to have someone who's kind of on the journey with you. And I was very fortunate that as soon as me and my partner kind of made our split, I found an awesome E-Myth coach, somebody that I work with still today, 3.5 years later. And he kind of became that sounding board. And at some level, I would say he's even a much higher level sounding board, because he's very objective, understands business at a much higher level. And he doesn't have all the filters of what, the normal myths are about house flipping, right? He's just like, this is good business. And so it's emotionally extremely scary. And I would say that the biggest changes to my business lately have not been the old, like, me building systems and all the nerd stuff that I did for the first 7 years, which I love and I advocate. I think we have to be a nerds a lot, but it's been emotional intelligence has been the big thing. It's like learning to be kinder to myself and others, and have relationships and connections, and finding that balance between getting results and also being a great leader, and having people love you. Because me and my partner, he was the person everyone loved, and I was the guy who got the results. And eventually we found that center where we could both do both things very well. And emotional intelligence has been my big thing that I feel like, and it just changed my business naturally, but it's also changed the relationships with people in my business and my family, which is invaluable, right? There's no price on that.
Yeah, definitely. I think we all entrepreneurs, we go through different phases. And I know this past year I hired a COO, and he's kind of running a lot of the operations. And I've been on more of this personal growth, reflection, getting ready to turn 40 next year. And that's kind of like a big age where you're starting to think about, what do I want these next 10 years to look like, or whatever that looks like. But I think we go through that. One of my coaches told me yesterday that when we get into entrepreneurship, we just want to make a lot of money, right? Once we made a lot of money, then we just want more time. And then once we have the time, really, it just boils down to, we just want really close relationships. And
Yeah.
that's some of the journey that we go through.
Very insightful. I mean, exactly what I've experienced. So yeah, I guess I've been going through that evolution of wisdom over the last couple of years. First 7 was all about flipping, and now it's about how to be a wise person. I plan on flipping the rest of my life. I really love doing it. I've made my business so easy to run that there's no reason to have a plan B. Like, I'm not thinking about building portfolios and retiring to beaches. I got a lot of personal love that comes from this, and I just really enjoy 20 hours a week is my perfect balance. I could really literally do this until I'm just too old to think clearly.
But you got to do something. You're not just around in your bathrobe.
I know that wouldn't be me. I would go crazy.
No, that's funny. So I want to ask one last question in this section. And you have started recently doing a podcast called The Flip Factor. And what's that all about? What do you talk about? And why did you decide to do that?
So for me, a lot of one of the things coaches ask is like, once you have this free time, he's like, Mike, what's the purpose? Like, what is the big way of giving back? Like you said, that involvement. So I started coaching and helping others. Very small group. I'm not doing it like guru. You'll see me in your town next month. Very small. I just love having the interaction with other people on the journey with me, being able to brainstorm and talk, help them build their business and have a lot of success through them. And also, I find my business does better. So the podcast was all a piece of that, just really being able to give back in a big way. I tried YouTube, tried like Facebook, and I realized I'm not a selfie guy. So I did that begrudgingly, but I'm loving getting on, having conversations with awesome people like you and other guests that come on, and really just sometimes I'm just sitting there with like one of the guys that works with me, and we're just talking, right? But all content, just like it seems like this show is all content as I listen to it and check it out. It's great. And that's what I think people need. We found it, like there was a lot of shows we were listening to that were like all other stuff, but not a lot of like how to the nuts and bolts. So for the nerdy people who love the nuts and bolts and want to know exactly like step by step, that's pretty much what we're doing on the show. We're just sharing awesome discoveries and things we're doing and wins. And it is very analytical, and we try to put some emotion into it, but like that's been the big part of the journey. It's just been fun to share. And we've gotten a great response from it. I mean, people have really loved the show so far, and that's been
Awesome.
inspiring for us.
No, definitely. I think that there's not a lot of shows out there that really dive in to the how-to. So how-to flipping for just the normal guys, that's all. Flip Factor. So check that out if you're listening. Flip Factor, the podcast with Michael Green. Check that out. We'll link in our show notes as well. And Michael, that's the wrap of that section. And I thank you again so much for being on the show. But I always like to end each show with a little touch of randomness. So I've prepared 3 random questions for you. So name the first thing that comes to your mind, and you don't have to think about these too much. So number 1, what is a hobby of passion for you? Like what's a hobby that you're passionate about?
I mean, right now it's been trying to learn how to surf and snowboard and do some stuff like outside of like analytics and analyzing business and all that, just getting out in nature more and out of my living room.
Out of your bathrobe.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Next one. Where is your favorite place in the world?
I'd have to say it's Costa Rica. I love Costa Rica. It's just I found this place called Jaco Beach, and people are playing guitar, and I play a little bit of guitar as a child, and so it's like good food, and beach is beautiful, and people are friendly, and it's pretty affordable to go there. And there's a couple coffee shops that got good Wi-Fi, so I can run my business from there.
That's awesome. Love that. Love that. Last one. If money or time, and they might not be right now, if money or time were no object, what would you do this weekend?
Oh man, I feel like I get to do that every day, and I wish I had a better answer, but it's so awesome being able to like live on X amount of dollars and make more than that. That's true financial freedom. People think you have to hit the lottery to have financial freedom, but if you make 50, spend 50K a year and make 100 in 2 years, you were pretty financially free because you have a lot of, and that's where I've been working on spending less, making more, and just banking that away and keeping a very modest lifestyle. So ultimately, if I just have the time, I can just like think of any cool thing. I've been doing that for the last couple of years, like where do I want to go, what I want to do, almost creating that bucket list and kind of knocking it out.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, hey, thank you so much for answering those questions, just having some fun with our listeners. But I want to give you one last opportunity to tell all of our listening audience, where's the best place to find out more information about you or your company?
So 2 places. One would be my website, which is theflipfactor.net. That's theflipfactor.net. You can also reach me at mike@theflipfactor.net. That's my email, my personal email directly to me.
All right. And you guys can check those out on our website at simplewholesaling.com/episode 187. And this is a wrap with Michael Green. Thank you so much, Michael. It has been an honor, man.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much.